Hello, and welcome to the Indie Ocean Video Reviews. Today's review is going to be Final Rift, which is one of my favourite Xbox Live indie games so far. I have to open with a question. Have you, my listener, ever played Elite? Did you, like me, die repeatedly in teeth-gnashingly frustrating space battles with unskilled assailants simply because your elegant, wedge-shaped craft handled like a dead cow? Did you, like me, eventually resort to plying safe trade routes between identical planets, eyes glazed like an aging salesman trying to make his last bonus check before his eventual weary retirement? I know people consider Elite a classic. And yes, I have been vigorously informed several times that I shouldn't have played it on the NES. It's probably not the best place for it. The Amiga version probably handled a lot better, if nothing else. The NES version's controls really were like trying to manipulate a bovine carcass into a comical pose using only a pair of oil-coated pliers that you have clutched between your teeth while falling down a hill. Clunky doesn't even begin to cover it. But that isn't the point. My full and more thoroughly explained thoughts on Elite itself have been explained elsewhere. Feel free to check out honestgamers.com for my review of it if you like. But my point is I'm not reviewing Elite here. The point is, Final Rift on Xbox Live Indie Games is exactly what I feel Elite on a console should have been in the first place. There's no denying that Final Rift is Elite in almost all respects. There are, of course, alterations, but a lot of them are quite minor. The inclusion of the option to buy information from locals in canteens, and to play a simple mini-game for small cash rewards and other bits and pieces, are good examples of these notable but quite minor additions. Final Rift also has fractionally, though only fractionally, more of a story than Elite. A story which is revealed periodically in short text boxes. Fortunately, they are quite short and so not too much of a chore to read. Where the aim of Elite was barely more than slouch around the universe doing whatever comes to mind, Final Rift makes its end goal clear from the outset. You are to reach the last of a series of increasingly dangerous regions of distorted space, each known as a rift of one sort or another, so you are trying to get to the Final Rift, as the title would suggest. As someone who played the original Wandering Space Trader game 20 plus years ago, my thoughts upon first starting Final Rift were something like, hey, this is Elite! Wait, it even has the same radar as Elite! Followed in quick succession by, but it's not wireframe, and finally by, holy crap, I can actually fly this thing without wanting to break down in tears. Playing Final Rift, it rapidly becomes apparent that spaceflight always deserved analog control. Bear in mind that when I played Elite on the NES, it was, of course, digital control rather than analog, and on a D-pad rather than a stick. Though some control clunkiness does remain in Final Rift, for instance, accelerating and decelerating using up and down on the left stick, which doesn't feel ideal, nonetheless, the overall flight control feels smooth and comfortable, certainly more so than in the past, and it's amazing how much difference that makes. I largely revile Elite, much to the consternation of many of my fellow game-playing people. But this game, with very similar general content and tone and gameplay style, rapidly became one of my favourite indie games of the last few months. Purely based on the fact that it's actually comfortable and pleasant to control, rather than marginally less enjoyable than being headbutted in the face. A few other niggles from Elite have been smoothed out here too. You have a limited stock of fuel, but this is now used only for a sort of hard burn acceleration that enables easy escape from combat, or a quicker approach to distant targets within each solar system. Hopping from system to system, rather than consuming fuel as it did in Elite, is all done here on some sort of unlimited fuel supply, which makes an unexpected encounter with pirates or warring aliens far less fatal. In Elite, I frequently found myself beset by pirates immediately upon entering a solar system and lacking the fuel to make a quick escape. I'm not saying it's easy to pull off a rapid escape in Final Rift. There are still some hoops you have to jump through, quite literally in this case, but it's still a lot more practical than it was in Elite. These encounters then are still dangerous and quite tense, but they're no longer a near certain death sentence as they used to be. The removal of this hyperspace fuel doesn't mean long distance travel has just been pared down to a negligible minimum, though. In place of the need to refuel, Final Rift has us navigate a warp tunnel in order to successfully launch to a neighbouring planet, and this is what I was talking about when I said literal hoops. The tunnel takes the form of a series of hoop-like circles or squares that must all be flown through in sequence. And it's very simple, and it's generally not difficult to do unless you're under heavy fire. But it's a welcome addition, as far as I'm concerned. It's quite easy to just coast through the hoops in a leisurely fashion, but when you're trying to do it at full speed because you're in the middle of combat and already badly damaged, it becomes quite tense. So I think this mechanic works well, and it's one of my favourite additions to Final Rift over the basic Elite template. Even NPC vessels use this warp tunnel system, which you can see in the occasional optional escort missions that you can pick up in many space stations, in which you fight off pirates or hostile military craft, while some defenceless civilian bolts for the safety of hyperspace. It amused and slightly satisfied me to notice the first time that these civilians I was escorting had to go through the warp tunnel dance just like I did. It's a nice feature, a bit of attention to detail that I appreciated. These missions, as I say, are available from space stations, and there are other types of missions available too, mainly bounty hunts and cargo runs. Personally, my favourites are the bounty hunts. Just go out and kill something that's nearby. The space stations are the main source of the game's other facilities as well, ranging from the expected cargo markets, where you can buy and sell cargo, to the Spacefarer's Canteen, where, as mentioned before, you can buy information and play a little game, to the upgrade shop, which does what it says on the tin. Many of these facilities require a certain degree of reputation in either combat or trade or both, in order to get the best from them. But getting your reputation up to a suitable level is never too difficult with a bit of graft. But, having said all of that, I'm not claiming Final Rift is perfect. It is certainly not perfect. Like its wireframe predecessor, it does very little to distinguish worlds from each other, with really only a planet's technological level and the extent of its piracy to set it apart from any other planets. Final Rift sticks to Elite's practice of allowing the player only to access identical space stations orbiting the planets rather than the planets themselves. And sadly, it lacks the short, humorous, vaguely Douglas Adams-esque descriptions that were one of the highlights of Elite for me. Things like a planet populated by technophobic purple penguins, that sort of thing. We don't get those here. As a result, this new interpretation of the formula, in the form of Final Rift, maintains Elite's risk of rapidly becoming dull, while some of the gameplay mechanics are more interesting and sustain interest for longer than Elite did for me. The exclusion of some of these humorous elements and bits of detail offsets that a little bit. Even the game itself slightly awkwardly acknowledges the potential for eventual boredom. Some of its plot advancement text boxes remark that all the worlds blur together as your character repeats the same routine endlessly. It's self-deprecating and it made me smile, but it's also... it raised the question for me of, if you know that this is danger, why not do something about it? Anyway, it's for this reason that Final Rift's relative brevity is a boon as much as it is a flaw. Generally, I don't praise the brevity of games too highly. I like to get a good run out of my games. But in this case, the fact that Final Rift is much, much shorter than Elite actually works in its favour. Where Elite offered 6 sprawling galaxies packed with dozens of planets, Final Rift presents a similar number of rifts, which is this game's version of a galaxy, but puts only a handful of worlds in each. This savagely hacks away at the sense of scale that some people found to be the main source of Elite's appeal, but it does help prevent the onset of tedium. Overall, then, Final Rift comes highly recommended for anyone who either enjoyed Elite or found their enjoyment of Elite thwarted by the apocalyptically rubbish controls. Final Rift should be an easy and affordable purchase to justify. Personally, I feel that Final Rift is very much worth playing, even for those who never played the rickety old space exploration workhorse Elite back in the day. Though maybe those unfamiliar with Final Rift's parentage might not get the appeal. It's hard for someone who's accustomed to playing Elite to tell how well a game like Final Rift will sit with someone who's never played this type of game before. It might conceivably feel outdated or stale or something of that nature, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a lot of fun. Not perfect, but fun. Regardless, 80 Microsoft points, 60p here in the UK or $1 in the US, is a ridiculous bargain for a smoother, more modern update of a game that many people still consider a classic and that in many ways was ahead of its time. I strongly urge anyone who finds the idea of space exploration and combat even remotely appealing to at least play the trial. And you never know, maybe you'll find that it's worth 60p of a gamble. Anyway, that about wraps it up for Final Rift, a glowing recommendation, but with a few criticisms about the risk of boredom setting in. I will come clean and say I haven't finished Final Rift yet. I played quite a lot of it, I've played for a few hours, but I never got to the end. So, I do want to add that although I said it's much shorter than Elite, that's because Elite is about 1 million years long. This game is shorter, but you'll still get a good few hours out of it. So, overall, be slightly wary of the potential for tedium, but otherwise, strong recommendation. Once again, thank you for listening. There will be more videos forthcoming in the future.